Hey, yeah, we're doing what's up? And today I'm gonna do a review on the very latest Mr. Robot Season 3. Excuse my hairline, cause I just woke up and my hair looks like shit, but just move on and watch the review. So I'm gonna do a quick recap of Mr. Robot. Elliot was a hacker struggling with schizophrenia and multiple identity disorder, so Elliot was actually two-person. One was himself, and the other one was Mr. Robot. Yeah, if you haven't watched Season 1 or Season 2, don't watch this review. Just skip to the end to find the score, if you are really that curious. Anyway, he was himself and Mr. Robot at the same time, and Mr. Robot was the more evil and brave version of Elliot. And he's kind of like Elliot's dad, too. So we have Angela, who's friends with Elliot for a very long time, just like Elliot. They both wanted to avenge their parents' deaths by somehow taking down a company called E-Corp, because apparently their parents' deaths are connected to a mistake made by E-Corp. Meanwhile, Elliot's sister Darlene helped Elliot run a hacker group called F Society, and a man called Tyrell Wellick decided to help Elliot to break E-Corp. And then the Dark Army and White Rose wanted to help Elliot to fight against E-Corp, but apparently it's not really Elliot who's trying to get help from the Dark Army. Apparently it's Mr. Robot, so Elliot needed to stop Mr. Robot. And that's basically the plot. It's complicated, so go watch the first two seasons yourself. The first episode is Power Saver Mode, which is another promising start to an anticipated season. It's good. It's not great, but it's okay. Things looked a lot different than season 1 and 2, and it's because this episode just feels painfully and damningly realistic. And even though Angela started to become a more interesting character who's having second thoughts on trusting Elliot, it's still ominously realistic. I really enjoyed the scene where Elliot muted the audio for a couple of seconds because it got noisy. A creative fourth wall break, I'll say, again. And he also had a monologue where he blamed himself for the chaos in the society, and I feel like Sam Esmail, the writer of the TV show The Creator, wanted to use this monologue to point at politicians like Donald Trump and Theresa May. Which isn't too bad of a call, to be honest. It is a pretty good way for a television show creator to express his political opinions. But it can go a little bit better, you know? It's not as cryptic and as dreamy and as intriguing as Season 2's first episode. Season 2 started like a whole new world, and it felt overworldly and fantasizing, while this episode is more authentic. Then it's Episode 2, Undo. There is still not much progress on the plot. Not much drama is developed. So, since there's only 10 episodes this season, the writers, they better get hurry. So Elliot now got a job at E-Corp and it was doing great. And there's this 8-minute long montage of him working at E-Corp every day. And he even made a reference to emojis during the montage, which I think is pretty funny. I also really like what happened to Joanna Wellick. He suddenly showed up on a talk show and it was a bit confusing. And what happened to her later was even more shocking and surprising. And the ending is where Elliot realized Mr. Robot was plotting behind him all along, and he had something to say to the FBI, which is interesting. It's an okay episode. It's not special or anything, but it's okay. Over to episode 3, Legacy, which is a Tyrell episode like Debug back in the first season. If you're looking for answers for all the questions you asked in the season 1 finale, you're looking for this episode. So after the 9-5 attack, Tyrell got protection and he basically hid inside a house for weeks. And Leon was sent by the Dark Army to take care of Elliot in the prison, and then Cisco was also involved with the Dark Army. So in other words, this episode is basically the entire season 2 seen in Tyrell and Irving's perspective. And yes, speaking of Irving, Bobby Cannavale did an amazing job as Irving. You have to watch it. The whole time the FBI missed one person, and that person is the answer of all these questions. And go watch the episode and you'll know who is the person who's connecting all these events. And also, there's a mild plot twist that I find a little bit surprising and cool, is that the boss of Dom is also somehow connected to the Dark Army in a special way. And that Frank guy from the TV also was somehow connected to White Rose, apparently. And apparently supporting Trump is one of White Rose's plan. And I think that's really funny, you know. I don't want to get into politics, but come on, let's be honest. Donald Trump. But how Sam Esmail put Trump into the story is really funny. Then it's episode 4, Metadata. It's almost halfway through season 3, and the writers still haven't put out anything spectacular yet, but still, don't get your hopes down. On this episode, Elliot trusted Darlene again, and Tyrell wanted to break off with Mr.Robot because of him turning into Elliot. And Darlene agreed to help the FBI to find Tyrell, but not much progress has been made. As far as I can tell, this episode is kinda like a filler, and it has one of the weaker endings to a Mr.Robot episode. On to episode 5, Runtime Error. It's halfway to the season, and for the previous 4 episodes, I felt a little bit underwhelmed because of how slow the build-up it is. But this episode completely broke the pace and put a lightning bolt into the plot. I know that's a weird way to say it, but this episode just blew my expectations out of the water. Anyway, this episode is really intense and it's unexpectedly well directed. Elliot woke up and things started to get weird and people are chasing him down and he's running away and hiding. And Angela was taking care of things on her own and she almost got caught and it was suspenseful. I'm giving a spoiler alert. Yes, just like the movie Birdman by Alejandro G. Iñárritu, this episode looks like it's completely shot in one take, and it looks like, because it's freaking impossible to shoot this thing in one take, the choreography that took place is insane because of that, and halfway through the episode, a riot broke into the E-Corp building, and it was chaotic. And not much things are as suspenseful and as entertaining as Elliot and Angela being chased around everywhere inside the E-Corp building. It was like a video game. And then there's a scene I love a lot, and it's where the camera went away from Elliot and Darlene to a reporter. And the headlines popped up like the news, and then the reporter started to speak. It's the coolest transition between cinema and a wall-breaking news segment. Yes, a long take is really cool, but this is another cool. And overall, this episode kind of blew my mind. And the story progresses on to episode 6, Kill Process. Yes, the show is finally catching back up with the pace, and now it becomes the brilliant show I once loved again. So Darlene realized that Angela did the stage 2 thing, and Darlene went to Angela's place to confront her. Meanwhile, Dom had a lead on where Tyrell might be, but Dom's boss, Santiago, didn't want Dom to find Tyrell that much, so Dom was in a pretty bad situation. And the most important of all is Elliot trying to stop stage 2 from actually happening. And so many dramatic things happened on this episode, and the ending made my jaws drop. It's such a twist. I have to give a spoiler alert again. First of all, Dom found out about the red wheelbarrow, which was, well, where Tyrell was hiding, And Dom actually went there without Santiago's permission, and Terrell was gone. And Santiago was secretly helping Terrell the whole time. Anyway, Dom gave up and walked back, and suddenly Tyrell showed up in the public, yelling, "Stop the attacks! Stop the attacks!" And that's probably the most unpredictable way for Terrell to show up, because we all thought the Dark Army knew how to help Terrell escape, but somehow this is all we got, and that's really smart. And oh my gosh, Elliot realized that Angela initiated stage 2, so he needed to stop it himself. And he went to the specific facility and tried to hack it back from within. But then these flashes and glitches started to occur, and Elliot suddenly teleported into a taxi, and it was confusing. And apparently it's because Mr. Robot took over him for a while suddenly and tried to get away in a cab. Then Elliot took control back again and tried to go back. And he keeps on flashing and glitching out. It was hard for him to hack from within. It was even hard for him to control himself, basically. So instead of that, Elliot had to go to the room himself to literally stop the explosion from happening. And on the way, he keeps on changing into Mr. Robot, and Mr. Robot kept on hurting himself in order to hurt Elliot. So in real life, it's basically Elliot keep banging his head against something and pushing himself to the wall, and it was insane. But at the end, Elliot and Mr. Robot talked with a notepad in a computer outside of the room, and Elliot convinced Mr. Robot to help him stop the explosion, and we didn't even get to see it done. Just snap, no explosions. At the end, it may seem like Elliot had saved the day, but actually Elliot only saved one part of it, because all other E-Corp facilities around the world blew up, and it was White Rose's plan. That's really shocking, and now we know that White Rose is the ultimate bad guy. Moving on to episode 7, Frederick plus Tanya. So basically, Trenton and Mobley were back. Leon, aka Joey Badass's character, were together, and Leon was out killing people, and Trenton and Mobley were very confused and scared on what's gonna happen to them. The ending of the episode was so unpredictable and shocking, tragic and brutal. I thought the show would throw a twist there, more like a turn, but it's like an anti-turn, so I would have never expected the ending. And that's so fucking brilliant. And I have no idea how Sam Esmail and the writers keep writing excellent story consistently. The show is on a roll, and I'm giving a spoiler alert again. That's a lot of spoiler alerts. Wow. After the attacks from the previous episode, Philip Price figured out what was actually going on, and he confronted White Rose face to face in a dinner. And that was a really interesting and intense conversation. I really like Philip's character because of how full of himself he is. But after he was attacked that insanely, instead of crying and curling in a corner, he was curious, why was he attacked? And White Rose really showed his or her evilness on this episode. And I also like how Angela coped to her actions by fooling herself into thinking that the dead people came back alive. But the ending was brutal, oh my gosh. After seeing Mobley and Trenton going places with Leon, they end up getting killed anyway. The show would probably spare their lives in the very end, but they end up getting killed anyway. And that's really shocking. The Dark Army people showed up, and this Chinese dude started to talk about killing and suicide and how honorable suicide is, and the people in masks were forcing Mobley and Trenton to point a gun to their heads. And I was thinking, maybe they were just sweating them, and maybe they'll give them a chance because they'll obey the Dark Army because they're scared. Maybe the show would actually keep them alive, and at the end it goes quiet. And it's slowly revealed that they're actually dead. Wow. Leon took them all the way to this house and they got killed anyways. That is how pathetic and tragic it is. On to episode 8, Don't Delete Me, which is admittedly a filler episode, but it's a very good one. In fact, the best filler episode since Breaking Bad's Fly, because it is such a touching, a heartfelt, and emotionally deep episode. So basically, after what happened last episode, Elliot tried to calm himself down by talking to the family of the deceased, one of which was a brother of a deceased person, and he was like 10 years younger than Elliot himself, and basically his parents weren't at home and he followed Elliot around. Elliot realized that, and he started taking care of the kid because he's locked out of his house. His parents had the keys, and so Elliot took him to the movies and took care of him. There's a small twist at the end that really makes the kid's character stand out, but ultimately it's like the world had given Elliot a chance to love and care again, no matter the cost. So it's a beautiful filler episode. Then it's episode 9, stage 3, where Elliot had an idea to undo the 9-5 attack, which is very ambitious. To do that, he told the Dark Army that he had an idea for stage 3, but actually he did it for himself. Excuse the banging noises from the apartment above us. Wow. So Elliot told Darlene how to undo the hack, and Darlene said the FBI would help them. But the problem is, Mr. Robot said the Dark Army owned the FBI, and that makes for some really suspenseful story. And I also love how Sam Esmail, or whoever the writer is, used Joey Badass in the soundtrack. Literally. This episode is a slow burner, but it still has its great moments. At last, it's episode 10, Shut Down. I did a quick spoiler review right after I watched the episode. I uploaded it, so you can watch that as well. But anyway, my gosh, it's such a climactic episode. It's not really like the previous Mr. Robot finales like Zero Day or Python Part 2. They are more mind-bending and personal. Zero Day gives this overwhelming sense of warmth and peace that feels very odd, and Python Part 2 is incredibly puzzling, disorienting, and challenging. I can't read my script from up here, so... This one is way more dark, brutal, and realistic. I don't know if all the fans will like this episode because it takes a very different approach. But it's all good, and I'm giving a spoiler alert again. So Elliot and Mr. Robot finally teamed up, and it's really amazing. Unfortunately, Irving showed up and took him away. Then Santiago kidnapped Dom and Darlene and sent them to a barn far away where Elliot was taken. Leon was also there. Then Irving took Santiago and Dom out and axed Santiago to death when it's originally for Dom. It wasn't the most surprising death scene ever because people had done this before, but still, a satisfying one. And I love how Irving suddenly became this violent and powerful person who's actually more important than I expected him to be at the start. And Bobby Cannavale, he's great. Then the other Asian guy came here and told Leo to kill Darlene while he killed Elliot at the same time. Leo turned on him and killed every Dark Army member instead of Darlene. Yeah, I knew Darlene and Elliot wouldn't just die on this episode. That would be fucking stupid. I knew it, but it's still a cool scene. Then White Rose gave the Asian guy a call, and the Asian guy was so heartbroken he just killed himself. And at the end, Elliot finally undid the hack with the ultimate help from Mr. Robot, and that's a really gorgeous and happy ending to Mr. Robot, unexpectedly. And the post-credits scene also showed us that Vera is back. It's a very warm and beautiful ending for the season, and I think this episode also has some mind-boggling scenes. But it's just not as confusing and as conflicting as before. It's just more tense. Overall, this season is way different than the previous 2 seasons. The previous 2 seasons are disorienting, disjointed, and challenging. It also gets very personal and mind-bending with these crazy scenes and stories, but this season is more realistic in terms of how we perceive the story. And it gets really dramatic and political because of all the Dark Army, FBI, and E-Corp storylines. I don't know if all the Mr. Robot's fans will like this season, but I personally love this season as much as I loved the last 2. But I think it's still not as amazing as season 2, but it's better than season 1 though. Christian Slater, Rami Malek, and Bobby Cannavale, who plays Irving, gave amazing performances. I didn't know who Bobby Cannavale was. I haven't watched Boardwalk Empire, but man, he's a good actor. He's a good actor. And Joey Badass is also doing good. BD Wong is also kind of good, but I think he should practice Mandarin a little bit more for his role. But yeah, my Mandarin sucks too, so. And there's a ton of main character death scenes in this season. Wow. And there are more than one plot twists, and it's getting really complicated and climactic really fast. The first 4 episodes feels a bit bland because it's a slow burner, so they're still good. And the last 6 episodes are fucking hyped, and that's a job well done to Sam Esmail and the rest of the writers. The worst is episode 4, Metadata, and the best is both episode 5 and 6, Runtime Error and Kill Process. But if I have to pick one, it would be probably episode 5. I'm saying Mr. Robot Season 3 is mind-blowing, and I'm still gonna give it a solid 9 out of 10. So, have you watched Mr. Robot Season 3? From 1 to 10, how much would you rate it? Like if you like it, and subscribe if you want more. And I'm gonna have to continue revising for my exam.